Excuse me.
Because this is going to be a tremendously insightful meeting. So
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, let me. Last time there was talk about, okay, we want to have, an explanation of what the whole process is and methodology and stuff like that. So I got two things to share today. One is kind of an overview of from soup to nuts, sort of how this thing, what the steps would be. And the second one is some initial work that I shared with Parijat, and I don't know if I shared with others, maybe I did, where starting to design the assessment tool and the analysis tool. So let me just share my screen and I'll walk through the slides that we have. That will hopefully help us out. So we started with this. You remember, Kesra and maybe Parijat, we had this kind of complicated diagram showing how everything shows, impacts everything else. And what I wanted to do is take this apart and then kind of explain how this would work. So we have the processes and technologies side where we have these elements of maturity as they're defined on the right side of the screen that will be used in these first three steps of the improvement methodology. And then we also have the similar thing on our topic, the people and workforce, and I kind of merged it, workforce and organization, and I kind of merged it into this people column, mostly because it makes sense and because people are also suggesting that this should be done. So we have designed these questions, and I'll show just initially what these things, this kind of view in Excel so far, what it looks like, because it was just a foundation to look at the information that was developed and the things that were developed during the last year of UAIM. And both Parijat and Kesra are really familiar with it. Philip, this was a questionnaire, a survey that was developed as a group, and Kesra has a entire slide deck to explain how we went from 400 comments to get to this kind of set of questions.
Okay, I have a quick question. Will you be able to share these slides with me after the meeting?
Yes, these slides. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. These. What would be helpful is I may put the link into the chat line. I don't know if I have your full email address, but if you send me, sorry.
May I give it to you now, or would you prefer for me to give it to you after?
Yeah. If you just put it into the chat line.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just put it into the chat line, or I can give you my email address if you just want to email it to me later, whatever you're comfortable. What would be easier for you?
Give me your email address.
Okay, let me. It's CELLO.
I can put your email in the chat line.
Okay. Thank you, Kesra.
Thank you so much.
So both the Excel spreadsheet that I'm showing and the PowerPoint presentation are already in the posted to our common repository. So I'll just send you a link. You'll be able, and I have to also add you to the roster so you get invites to the meetings and things like that.
Thank you so very much.
Yes, so we'll make sure of that. And so these are just the questions, and then there is a worksheet that kind of shows how somebody would score and answer these questions. So this is the organizational strategy and performance thing, and you will notice that this is like the maturity level for overall, And then these are the choices that people make. So if you see, if I go to neutral here, then it will change this number. And
Okay.
so, I've kind of developed where people would be entering their information into here. And this is the second, and then they would just mark these cells, with an X or a check mark or whatever. This is just kind of conceptual. I mean, designed for now, not to the level of detail, whether, what symbol would be used. I'm sorry. I have this sneeze coming up. Oh, sorry about that.
But you put in the 1 through 5 score. It's just that it could be summarized up, right?
Well, what I did here is I gave them the options like that are actually in the options in the survey, right? Yep. So if they go neutral, it changes here and it automatically adjusts the score for the entire block. For in this case, it's let me just.
But you can put in the answers to the individual questions, right?
Yeah, you just select the question and you click on your choice.
Right.
But I mean, it won't be in this Excel format though, right, Cello? It's going to be in that Microsoft Teams survey. And then this is going to happen in the background. Are you saying, I guess I'm not following where this Excel spreadsheet comes into play?
This Excel spreadsheet is intended to be the design implemented, which implements the logic and shows roughly what the dashboards could look like.
Okay.
But the idea is not that we would share it on Teams. We developed the assessment also in a Microsoft Forms, if you recall.
Right.
Yeah, you meant Microsoft Forms, not Microsoft Teams, right?
Yes, that's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the that I will finalize once it's in Microsoft Forms. It's not as easy for the group to go in there and be changing it. So if they have any comments, I thought everybody has Excel. They know how to look at the stuff. If they have comments, they have even the logic they can play with, and they can let me know.
So this is really a prototype. You're just building a prototype for testing purposes, and then eventually you'll build this logic to Microsoft.
Yes, we will be most likely using Microsoft Forms, and then also taking the because the results from Microsoft Forms, I think that these are discussions that I think are really about the kind of under the hood mechanics of how this will be happening, and they're kind of still ongoing. And the idea is that we would use Power BI to analyze the results that are entered into Microsoft Forms.
Okay. Hey, Cello, one thing that isn't quite as good in this example is that you're not answering the individual questions, which is going to actually, so does not have a strategic plan, for example. You'd put that
you're talking about the tier 2 questions. Is that correct?
No. Yeah, I'm sorry, but
no. So this is a tier 1 questions. You see these.
Yeah, I guess my question, just a threshold question, is wouldn't you want to, I mean, either you would tend to answer the tier 1 question and not the tier 2, or you would answer the tier 2 questions, which would roll up to the tier 1.
Okay, the way this is not the logic. The logic of selecting these things will be in Microsoft Forms. So in Microsoft Forms, if you answer agree, you would not even get these questions.
Right.
You would just go to the next question. And if you enter disagree, you would get these questions. So I didn't want to put all that logic into
My
Excel.
fault. I'm sorry. I misinterpreted. I get it. I get it. You'll do the drop down later. Yeah.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is the path that will direct you to answer these questions will be done in Microsoft Forms.
Okay.
This is just for design. So, and in Microsoft Form, there'll be, you know, check marks or bubbles and check boxes and stuff like that. They have all that there.
Yes.
What I wanted to make sure is that they will not have a drop down like this. They'll have an actual question with a number, and these will be the options.
Yep. Yep.
So, but at the end of the day, the overall maturity, we can have several discussions as a team while this is still in a spreadsheet format and like a prototype, like Kaysar says, because we can, for example, say, do we want to have weights? Because you see, if I change, look at the number here, if I change the number here to weight is 2,
Yep.
it will change. So we want to discuss, should we have these questions weighted? You know, should there be weights? And then this thing rolls up only from tier 1 questions, and the tier 2 questions, which are here, which I think it'll be helpful for people when they watch the recording to also see, you know, hear answers to these questions. So it's good that you asked, is we will decide how to use the responses from here in a dashboard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, real good.
Yeah, so far, the only thing that I've kind of paid attention in this prototype is these kind of tier 1 questions and overall maturity. And then we can discuss whether these things that are subcategories like this, you know, these, how should they be treated? Should they be treated to impact because they're kind of, sorry, Kaysar.
Yeah, no, Chalo, I agree with you. I think where you're going with this, if I'm understanding correctly before you proceed, is to say the level 1 questions are the ones that are determining the maturity level of the organization in each of these categories. And so, and then your overall score. So you'll be able to say by category how good or bad you are, and then you have an overall average score. The tier 2 question really go to how do we treat? Okay, so if I scored really low on employee engagement category, for example, then the level 2 questions come into place to say why, what is it that employees are feeling are missing. So the score is really on level 1 questions. The level 2 questions get us to the next level to say how do we treat the rating, the low rating that we got on those. Is that sort of?
That's correct. So the tier 1 responses would produce a summary dashboard for every category. And this is actually in the spreadsheet already linked so that when you change these, this automatically adjusts, right? Okay. So I just switched to PowerPoint now. And then is that if, for example, the idea is that if you have these tier 1 responses, some of them will have tier 2 questions that are strongly disagree or neutral or whatever. So the idea is that the tool would allow you to dig in and dive in and look at the details. So for example, if you see here under reward and recognition, and somebody said strongly disagree, that's when you would go and you'll be able to open up the further detail of why they disagreed with this, why their response was strongly disagree. So it would be, like you said, it would be a second level of.
So it'll help you say, here's why you did that. So if you see if there are some common reasons of why, then those can be the the kind of things that you want to address in an improvement plan.
Exactly. So that there will be, so this was a dashboard for tier 1. And then there would be also in the actual thing is that you perhaps could, let's say, click on this one and see, you know, what, like I show here, and then see why. But the second thing is that once you would get all these tier 2 questions, you could then put a level of analytics on top of tier 2, the same way that we've done here for tier 1.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
So, Chalo, just a thought that if we click on this 2.5, then it will drill down and give you the reasons why it is 2.5.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the reasons would be built based on these answers on tier
Yes.
1 and the rate, you know, and the tier 2 questions.
Yeah, the why that they choose.
Exactly.
This is just a reporting issue, but it might be well to have for each of the 7 categories what the scores are within the 7 categories as well. In other words, you say if it's a 2.3, you know, well, what, or like I can hardly read it, but communications and feedback, I think it's
okay. Let me just see if I can give me just a second. Come on. So
yeah, just kind of a question is, this is a great summary level report, but you may want to see, well, what were the scores for each one of the
Right.
categories within
Yeah.
the category, so you can see, well, it might have been these 2 things that were prominent that you know, would be focused on. And,
okay, so you see the way it is now is this is the breakdown. This 2.5 comes from here.
right.
And it like, but you could build a dashboard to just have this, and then you could maybe click on this and get this, the tier 1 questions. And because here is when you see why, and then you could maybe dig deeper into the tier 2 level. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, right. It might be good to do both even, you know, because this shows you the basic information, but if you, I don't know.
Yeah, the question is really about the real estate on a screen, on a single screen.
Right.
Because if you look at it, this is already a lot of stuff for a screen.
Yeah.
And
I've seen a second screen, you know, on some of these kind of reports that would show what, let's just say, organizational strategy and performance. It would show there would be bars, and then there would be a composite. So you'd have the 2.5 on there, but you'd also have bars for each one of the others. You know,
okay, so
Yes.
just an option, but I've
If
seen.
I know, Scott, that we initially spoke about Gallup and how the Gallup report is
Yeah.
organized.
That's
You
right.
have the composite at the top, and then you have
Yes.
results for specific. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way the benchmarking stuff we did went too. So you'd have both. I like this is a nice screen. I really like it, but
Yeah.
you might want to have even a second screen that would, you know, then you can actually see. What I like about this one is it actually has the questions on it. And, you know, it's colorful and kind of neat to look at, but I like the bars also, so you can kind of see it visually, where the bars are, what the highs and the lows are on a bar.
okay, so you mean you would like to have an equivalent of this because you have it here in colors?
No, you do, but well, it's just what's a personal preference for people. But you know, Parjat said it better than me. But you wind up having the bars So you'll have the 2.5 would be the composite, and you'd have bars representing the other scores that show
That
where
could,
it came from. Rather than what's on the left here, although I like what's on the left. So it's kind of a choice.
I think that, you know, as far as the visualization and presentation, we can go to town with that, really.
Exactly.
And it's just a question, you know, and we don't have to immediately have the ultimate reporting tool.
Right.
Uh,
I think we can
this
just on it.
We get the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, we can maybe start with this, and then once we've gotten this where we like it, then we can start adding layers of additional information if we feel like we need to.
Well, you know, this was just a prototype done over this last weekend, so it's not intended to be the final product. So what just to go back to the PowerPoint, there were questions about, you know, what is the process? And, you know, I showed how, you know, we can have all sorts of reporting things, and we can just look at all the tier 1 responses and do some analytics on those and present them on a tier 2 screen. It's just that, you know, there's a lot of information. So it's not a problem at all. So now about the scope of work, what we've done so far is that we produce this assessment tool, which is the survey that then produces these results, and then we can talk about the how to deal with presenting and managing these responses, right? So this left side is what we've been working on so far, and I think maybe we should nail down what these questions are instead of constantly spending a lot more time on trying to redesign the questions. So, but after these things are done, we need to have a tool in addition to reporting, and I can even say reporting and analysis tool that actually examines these results and then produces information for improvement. So some information is in these visual dashboards, but some information may be in kind of summarizing, looking at patterns and stuff like that. So this is what we have overall on the project. We've been talking about this left column where we have an analysis tool. On the people column, we do have at least a solid prototype that was developed on for a different project on the process analysis tool, and the same thing for the technology. So we're working with these different initiatives to have these tools for each one of the columns and then line them up with the improvement method. So step 1 would be to finalize the questions. Step 2 is finalize this reporting tool and dashboard. At least when I say finalize it, you know, if this spreadsheet is version 0.5, have version 1.0 of the assessment tool. Step 3 is design and implement the analysis tool that draws from these results. Does this make sense so far?
Yep.
Kesra, what do you say?
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. And I don't know if you remember, I'd sent that email with sort of tasks I had in mind that would fit into these steps that you.
Yes, I remember your email. I don't think what I'm saying here is very different from your email.
No, it's not. It's not. What I'm saying is I think those are sort of more minor tasks that would fall into these categories. So I would suggest just to keep the team, especially when people miss a week or two or meetings, when they come back, they don't really know where in that process we are. That if we came up with one slide that we show at every start of every meeting and say, here are the 3 steps, and within these 3 steps, here are the various tasks, and this is what's been completed, and this is what's left. And so every meeting we come, we say, this is where we are in the whole scheme of things. I think it'll give people a good visual of, you know, and like I said, especially when you miss a meeting or two, you come back, you're sort of lost. Where are we in the process?
Yeah,
So
I wrote it down, and I also this weekend added 5 more steps. Is that okay with you, Keisha?
Yeah, I mean, what I came up with was just, you know, top
No,
of
it's
my
all
head.
good. It's all good.
Top of
But
my
I-
head, the things I could think of, but it would be great to have these 3 headings and then subtasks under each heading. And then we can say, this is where we're at. We are here, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a step ladder. If you want, I mean, if you want to send me all the steps that you have, and then send this, and I can put together one slide for you. That way, I know you have a lot of other things going on.
No problem at all. It's already posted, and you can, download it, make changes, and let me know. Let me, if you don't mind, let me put things in perspective to move around so I don't have sun directly in my face. So where do we go from here? We got this analysis tool. Then are we done here? We really should finalize this soon. Can we finalize the assessment tool in the next couple of weeks? And maybe this by the end of the year, we can, start thinking about the schedule. And then also consider that the overall strategy on the project, overall methodology on the project, always starts in the middle with the processes. So so the step 4, then after we're done that analysis, is we would really need to select the business process. What is it that we're going to, focus on to specific, to manage a specific process? And step 5 would be is how much do we have documentation on this process? How complicated it is? So I have a few questions that get at this to review existing documentation of the selected process. Okay, so this makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then next step would be maybe we need to document this process. If it's on the previous slide, if it's a question of calibrating a flow meter, probably don't need that much. You just need an SOP. But if it's something like CIP, you need a lot of documentation. So how much we document depends on the nature of the process. Parijat, does this make any sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. So if they scope it highly complex, we need to really have documentation on all these things. Philip, I'm not tossing too many questions of your way because it's your first time. So, but I would very much like you to raise your hand or interrupt me if you have a question or a comment.
No, I'm just following along. It seems to come together more as you explain it, but I'm just trying to keep up. But
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So then what do we do? Step 6A is that if we look at the process, we use these models also to understand the technology of the context and how we use technology. So that expands our analysis tools to both technology and the processes. And we have at least drafts for those already. So step 7 is then to develop assessment for the thing on the right. As I said, we just need to adjust it. It's been done on a different project. And then step 8 would be to integrate these 3 things and apply it to change management for a selected process, which means that we have a process documentation, we have a pilot, organization maps a certain process, looks at technology opportunities, and then applies this analytics tool analysis for the people side to the stakeholders who are involved in this process. So that's how we would kind of bring it all together, so that we would next year hopefully have a utility that would be able to do all 3, because just doing one doesn't really cover the whole thing. And it's really not that we have to invent all this. The drafts for each one of these things exist already.
So Cello, maybe going back to the workforce and organizational culture of the people one, you know, which this group is going to work on. This is a good overview of where ultimately it would be good for you know, utilities to get to using a particular process. But on the workforce and organizational culture, there's also the step, you know, that might have been on Kaysra's list. I can't remember, but it's okay. You've analyzed it. Now, what do you do about it in order to improve the organizational culture
Yes.
part of
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
So it's not a macro, you know, overall wise process, but within the
Yes.
workforce, there's a bunch of work to do, including the pilots and everything else, right?
Yes, yes. So what I could do is I could include what you're suggesting, we've talked about, is sort of like step 3A is produce recommendations or produce the results of the,
Right.
you know, the analysis.
Right, because those bars or, yeah, it almost might be, I mean, this is something for the team to work out, but are there sort of standard approaches or strategies to deal with low bars? And what would at least macro strategies be that could be recommended for utilities or pilots or, you know, to work with on the organizational culture and people side,
Okay.
that might be tailored given the individual circumstances that utilities are dealing with, but it might be helpful to have these macro, you know, approaches or strategies or scopes or something that they could work with.
Yeah, so I will include that here. And include what you're talking about, you know, I'll put it here or something, you know.
It could be like the step,
I'll-
if it was 3A or whatever. I mean, it's kind of like the analysis and recommendations, you know, almost, or recommended strategies or something like that, maybe. Yeah, or you've got it. Yeah, that's. And then the guidelines could kind of say that these are provided, but there might be tailoring or more specifics that individual utilities would develop.
Something like this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
And I think too is, you know, we have those maturity statements. We may want to kind of give them once over and have Mark maybe kind of give them once over. But for an organization, I think when we're looking at even these recommendations, we're saying, this is the state you want to get to, this is where you're at, you know, and
Yeah, it's a gap analysis kind of a thing.
yeah,
Yeah. Case where it's not that different than what we did on the benchmarking, actually. It's just applying it to this specifically, right?
Agreed, yes.
okay, is that better? So this would be sorry, there's like a 40-minute period in the day when I get sun straight into my face, and
I feel bad for you.
I need to tape something. It's a big double French door, and one of those squares is where it's coming from.
This is a minor thing, Cello, but where you have deficient, problematic, you might even want to say priority areas, because, you know, it's going to be up to them to define what is a priority to deal with, right?
Right.
Even if it's low, they could say, well, that's fine. I don't expect it to be higher now.
Yes, you see, in principle, yes, but in order to do that, it would be kind of helpful to have the weights. Because
Well, yeah, maybe, but even
And
if you
with
don't
this-
have, even if you don't have
Yeah.
them, let's say your lowest score, regardless of how you weight it, you know, you may say, I'm going to deal with that 5 years from now. I'm not going to deal with it now. It's not a priority right now. It's possible. Or I have to do these other things first, so I'm not going to really deal with it now. It's not necessarily, just because it's low doesn't necessarily mean that your strategy would be to address it immediately. You know, I'm just saying.
No,
it-
as far, I agree with you there, and I'll tell you why, because if you recall when we did our WASA analysis at Great Lakes Water Authority, when we got our scores, we were kind of surprised some of them rated high. We're like, really? I don't think any one of us, I mean, pretty much everybody was surprised that it rated high. But you know, it was like, yeah, this, you know, we're going to take this one with a grain of salt for now. But then there were others that we were saying, well, why did this score so low? We thought we were really good at this. And so that we kind of wanted, you know, we looked at that and then try to prioritize and say, which ones are we going to focus on first? Because obviously you can't address everything at one time.
Yeah.
And maybe some organizations can, but we knew we couldn't.
Yeah, or let's say that 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 a particular item in this particular survey is low. Well, it may, you know, let's say 2 of the leaders are all messed up and are screwing everything up. Well, you know, are you going to have a group that says we're going to take corrective action to fire the person, or to change them, or move them, or what, or you know, train them up, or, you know, you're not going to make it all public on, you know, some of that. So it's, you know, it just can be messy, but it comes down to, you're not going to deal with every low score either. You know, you're going to deal with some of them, but not all of them. I guess was my overall point. It's so you're going to want to prioritize what's important to you to address, which could be different than, you know, the priority of the question. You know, what you address might be different than the priority of the question, in principle. But I don't know. It can get messy. That's to deal with, and it's not necessarily you may take something that you're scoring high on and say, we want, like you were 4 out of 5. You say the important thing for us is to turn that 4 into a 5, as opposed to address something that's a 1. I mean, you get what I'm saying, Kesra? It just depends on what it is. But
Yes, it is very context based and would depend on specific situation that each utility is, you know,
Right.
where it is right now.
right.
So I added these things, and I think that these are really good points for discussion.
Yep.
And I'm not sure that we need to resolve all this. I think this is a better presentation now with these modifications.
Yep.
And I think that it might be helpful to have, you know, the steps. How does it eventually, you know, connect with the efforts from others, you know?
Yeah, because there could be step 3B or something, could be communication of this information to the appropriate stakeholders, or, you know, something.
Yeah.
For example, you know, it.
Yeah, you know, you know, my background in engineering, it's really process. I have to wear a hat. I have to block the sun. Sorry about that. I'll fix it later. But there are basically, choices with control systems where you say, am I building a decision support system or am I building automation? Am I building a system that will provide enough information for people to make decisions? Or am I building a system that will provide recommendations that will actually implement the changes? And when it comes to the people side, I think we're going to be mostly on the decision support side, meaning that people will have to look at these dashboards and then decide what to do, and that the guidelines may not be really aimed at automation, but decision support. And that means that these displays and reports can slowly evolve to provide better and better information. But as far as automation or kind of making decisions, that's likely not in the cards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if for each of the categories you had half a dozen potential strategies that you could select from to address, the items in that category might be.
Well, that's certainly great. The other, and the other thing is that as we have this collective and collaborative effort, we, instead of trying to define all these recommendations all in advance, we could say, we will provide a skeleton, an outline for this document. So when you go out and actually apply this, why don't we start filling it in based on your experience with your pilots and prototypes and things that you experienced?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that maybe we don't need to create the entire guidelines immediately, but just have a living document that's being adjusted by the group and shared and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just kind of started this, and but I want to get a sense about whether people, how you guys feel about all this. So Kaysra is usually the first one to jump in, so I'm gonna ask her.
I really like this. I think it shows a really good flow. Like I said, I just feel like so one of in some of the facilitation trainings that I've attended, they always say, start with, what the end is going to be for that, and because we're getting into some really complicated and very, wide array of things, I think that if we start with that one slide, and then these show the details. These slides are great, Cello, because they really show how we're going to move forward. And I really love them. I think this is exactly what I was thinking of the last meeting when I said, can we have something like this? But yeah, I think this is a great thing. Our first thing, and I noticed, I don't know, can you pull up the slide again?
Yeah, give me just a second.
I'm trying to remember which slide it was, but I just made some notes here. Oh, where you go through the step 1, step 2.
Okay, give me just 1 second. I'm pulling it up, and we'll share it in just a minute. Is this the slide you meant?
Yes. So my question to you is, so we say step 1 is finalize questions, right? Because I know I brought up a few things that I thought the team should kind of look. They're just fine tuning. They're not really, we're not changing the questions. We're not changing categories. There's nothing major. It's just that as you test these, as we pilot these, things came, as I was going through, especially when I was going through the SurveyMonkey itself, and I said, oh, if I was doing this, I would want to, So
Yeah.
that's how I came up with those things. But I think, so is the idea, how do we think our next meeting would be where we would finalize the questions?
Well, this is a really good question. And I've done, quite a bit of software development and delivering software. And there was a really wonderful, talk by one of the people. I think he may have been from Microsoft. And that is, when do you decide that a version of the software is ready to push out into the market? Because it's changing all the time. If you have to decide and say, okay, this is good enough, we're putting it out, this is what it is. And that's, how you do version control. So this guy who has spent his lifetime doing, he said, turning over a piece of software to a user, and it's so complex, and what their needs are, it's just like trying to hand over a plate of Jell-O, and you don't want it to be shaky. So you just move it gradually, and then that second that the Jell-O calms down, you just give it to the user and say, okay, go. And it's going to shake again, as soon as they take it. And I understand that there could be some fine tuning on these things, but there will be fine tuning. We have to balance, how do we make progress versus, and when you look at all the steps to go, we have to balance making some progress forward and making things perfect. Because
no, I understand, and that's the whole, the agile way of doing project management is exactly what you just said. But I thought the first meeting that we had when we had the large group was to say, we've been away from this for a while, so do we do that once over on the questions? And then we just move forward, and that's the reason why I brought that up, that once over with the team to say, this is it, and not to say that down the road, as we do the pilots, that these things might not change, because they might. The pilot, the whole point of the pilot is to say what works and what doesn't, so that we can change it before we say this is the sort of the final product. And as soon as you issue a final product, as soon as I buy a phone, the new version's already out there, right? So
yeah, the one issue with these different versions of this survey is that if the survey changes, new results may be incompatible for a broader analysis with the previous results. The same, you know what I mean?
That's why I think that those questions, if we can just have that once over, this is the final word, because those are not things that we would want to change often. If I want to do a survey this year and next year do the same, I want to do the same survey so I can see what my progress has been in those areas. I don't want those questions changing. So as we're working with the assessment tool and that, I just feel like we do need that one final. It's not like, okay, let's go through each question. We've given the people the opportunity to take the survey. We know the questions that were raised. I think somebody else also had a couple of things that they talked about. If we just bring up those at a meeting and say, just yay or nay, do we do this? And then we say, this is it.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. Lately, in the last week and a half, the attendance has dropped off a lot in meetings. And I heard from a couple of people, including Zonetta, that it's been like that, she said, on every sort of national level meetings. Mike Sweeney, you're also involved in all sorts of things, and I haven't pinged you with a question. Have you experienced sort of a drop in attendance recently in some of the initiatives that you're involved in?
Yes, Cello. I don't know what to attribute it to, but there has been a bit of a drop, and it may be a little bit of the time of year that you can't discount.
Yeah, my sense was that a lot of people may have, because of COVID, a ton of vacation saved up that's going to disappear at the end of the year, and that they're taking advantage of it. I know that on my day job, that's what I'm doing. So it may be, the just kind of seasonal, and because of COVID, people didn't take summer vacations. Now end is coming, and they don't want to lose it and stuff like that. So my question for that is that to get everybody on the call and get them to say yes or no, Kesra, would be wonderful. But I don't know if it's realistic, if we're going to be able to get everybody on the phone.
So then, the point is then, whatever the next meeting is, whoever's there, they make the decision and then we move on.
Okay,
But
another
you can't
option.
wait for every person to, there's always gonna be people that are not gonna be there.
Yeah, another thing that might be possible to achieve the same thing is for me to implement. I had comments from you and Patricia, and I can send the revised version. And I have to say, and I don't want to say, I reworked this damn thing and from scratch 3 times. First in Excel, then in Microsoft Teams. Then I changed from Microsoft Teams to going into SharePoint and doing it from SharePoint.
Right.
So I've done it 3 times. So if I implement the comments that I've received so far from you and Patricia and send it only to you and Patricia, who mostly provided comments. So if you're good with it, I can send it to all and say, you have 1 week to let us know if you have a problem with this.
That's fine. I think there was somebody else too besides Patricia.
Alice.
No, I don't remember, hold on. Else, and then she had listed,
Pat, it could have been Pat, I don't
I
know.
don't think it was Pat. Let me look at my emails.
And the other thing is that I sent out 3 things. The first one from SurveyMonkey is really kaput. That's been changed. Even the second SurveyMonkey was changed. Then the first forms I sent out, and then the second forms I sent out. So it's been through 4 cycles already. And I'm not saying that I want to ignore the comments. Just find the right balance.
No, and I absolutely agree with you. I just feel like after we were gone, we had that hiatus, we came back, one of the first things that people said, we would want to kind of refresh ourselves with those questions. And I'd rather not lose that opportunity, because once we create this and we start moving forward, it's going to be harder to change questions. This is the one time
Yeah. Okay.
opportunity to do it. So
if you can find that comment, if you don't mind forwarding it to me, I will look again through the comments that I've received. And we have 6 ongoing initiatives going concurrently. So to keep track of every comment on every initiative is 2 old guys like Scott and me. I mean, we have like 3 brain cells between us, the 2 of us, and he's got the 2. And so to keep track of all these things, and we got 77 people involved, it's just like.
I agree. So what I can do is I can, let me put the list together of what Patricia sent. And I can't recall who this other person was. And mine, I'll put them all on one list and I'll attach their emails, and then that way you'll have them all on one. And then and that's fine. What you said was, hey, we can incorporate those and then send it out to the team and say, you've got 5 days or whatever, a week, to say if you agree or disagree with these changes. And if, and then we just move forward.
Okay, so the one thing that I have a question before Parijat leaves. Parijat, I don't know if we scheduled any time to have this like technical discussion. Have we done that?
No.
Okay, so
Not yet.
I'll send you some proposed times, or you can send me some proposed times, because it's extremely beneficial for us to kind of have a discussion and work on this together, because it's been very helpful, the input that I received from you so far.
Okay, I will make just one more suggestion, saying if we could manage all this in GitHub and share just with core team, it would be much easier to track of all this than doing the emails.